So, good morning, everybody. Lance Tarchioni here with you. Not an actual Ask the Agronomist here. This is a little vignette we're going to call the Agronomist Ask, joined by my friend Scott Spal, and I'll let Scott introduce himself here in a minute. But we're at AgTech in St. Louis this week. AgTech is the kind of the somewhat the national sales meeting for agronomy nerds, and so we're all very excited to be back at a live in-person AgTech. And since there's a lot of folks here in town this week, we're taking some time to do some interviews, have some conversations. So tell us about yourself, what you do, where you came from, how you got here, whatever you want to share.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the invite. I'm glad that I'm lumped in with the agronomy nerds, but that's
the place to be, man.
Yeah, exactly. That is not my background. Plant physiologist by training. And actually came into what was then Monsanto to use plant physiology to study nematode pressure.
Okay.
Quickly realized that I needed to become a nematologist. So I worked R&D for 8 years developing seed treatments. So that was both chemistry and biological. And that's greenhouse based. All of that was greenhouse and growth chambers. So after that, I went into our market development organization and helped develop the data set for all of our population recommendations.
Right. Yep.
So I worked on that for about 3 years. And then my most recent move, now I've been in the role over in our digital farming solutions organization, so what was formerly Climate. And I support the team that is testing any of our new models that we want to put in.
We still have Climate, by the way.
Yes.
Just to be clear,
Yes.
that we just call it digital farming.
Yes.
Solutions or systems?
Solutions.
Solutions.
Digital farming solutions.
So
Yes.
D-
So we have
DFS.
to use both terms.
We couldn't just call it Climate. We need an acronym. So
Yes,
DFS.
Exactly. So over there, my team helps test new models with grower data. And so this is very early science still, but what we're trying to do is put our R&D data set together with our grower information to help provide the best recommendations for our farmers, to really start to have that partnership to say, this is the value of your data on your farm, and how can we help you then use that with the information that we have to make the best decision on your operation. Yeah.
So are you working on our Climate farms, on grower farms? Where are you doing your work?
Yes, so the step at which I interact is after it's been tested on our Climate farms. So our Climate farms are going to test the idea behind, can the data make the proper recommendation from a side-by-side scenario, like a true actual test. The next step then is taking it and putting in the grower data into that model to see what the output looks like. Because a lot of times what we'll see is that the science behind it would say this is the best recommendation for your operation, but there's agronomic considerations that are involved in however a grower's running their operation that we cannot predict. And so what we're trying to figure out is, what do we need to do in the next step to say include more information for grower data, or do we need to say to our product organization, hey, you guys need to think about these problems that we may encounter from a user experience or user interface type of scenario. So we're really just that first vetting of how close are we agronomically speaking. Yeah.
That's something that, when I've been involved with projects like that over the years, getting everything that's important to the grower somehow represented in that model has been a challenge.
Exactly.
And where do you think we set in straddling that fence, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, it's a super complex data set to start to work with, right? We've got so many growers putting their data in, we've got all that R&D data, and combining the two becomes messy. And I think what we're finding is that the user experience component, the way we present that information, is extremely important. And it's something that we've struggled to do in the past. And I think a lot of that is we're combining a technology company and an ag company, and it's still in its infancy. And where we're going with that, I believe, is really going to be around that partnership. How do we use Fieldview as the digital partnership and that platform to have a conversation with somebody about what are your motivations? We all know that ROI at the end of the day is the most important thing, but there are motivations that each customer has that we need to consider when we make a recommendation to them. So how do we put the data in front of them so that they can make the best decision and have an awesome conversation with their agronomist or their sales team? Yeah.
So we obviously take data privacy very seriously within Climate. And sometimes I actually encounter growers that wish we were doing more with their data.
Yeah.
And then there are growers on the other end of the spectrum that don't really want us to have their data at all. Where are we at in that continuum, and what can we do to learn more with the data that growers are providing to us, and I guess speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the biggest challenge that we have is how you bridge that gap, right? If you look at any technology adoption, there's going to be that adoption curve. You're going to have the early adopters, the guys that are excited about it. You're going to have the people that are more and more skeptical as you go across that continuum. So as we think about the tools that we build, it's really positioning them as using your data. And the key to that then is that balance between how much information are they comfortable sharing. I think that the first step into it is to start to show growers that the aggregation of their data over time is a valuable piece of information for them to make good decisions, and it's going to build upon what they already know, as opposed to replace anything that they've already been doing. It's just going to add to. The other piece then is, how do we start having that really purposeful conversation about how a customer interacts with their dealer or their field representatives in both the technical and sales side, right? Because that, to me, is where we get into that really strong conversation about what they're comfortable sharing. And I think that as we build tools to show them how they can use that data, that then they're going to rethink their willingness to share. But yeah, it's going to be a relationship.
Right.
And it really comes back down to that. Every single time that we've done any of this science, we can get super close on the science, and we think we're doing a great job. We've got a lot of really smart people on it. But at the end of the day, if I can't sit across the table with one of our customers and have a heart-to-heart about what is it that motivates you on your operation, I think we're going to continue to struggle. So that's how I've started to frame up all of the conversations that we have to understand, what do I need to fix in science, but then what do I need to tell everybody else to work on as well.
Yeah, I mean, when I talk with growers, I certainly encourage them to, if you're collecting data, great. Try to collect the best information you can. If you're not, you really ought to think about starting, even if you don't really see where the value is today.
Yes.
5 years down the road, you might see a lot of value in the fact that you started that 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And you got to start somewhere.
Yes.
And the more years of data you've got, the better. And so it's everybody's at a different spot on that. And
Exactly.
keeping it all to yourself in theory has some value. Being willing to share it might increase the value of that data. Talk a little bit about one of the things that I see as a limitation. We can look back and see what's happened.
Yep.
We can't necessarily predict the future, especially from a weather standpoint.
Not
and
well.
weather's such a huge variable.
Huge. Number one driver.
You can develop the best script in the world.
Yep.
But to some extent, it's based on what has happened.
Correct.
And it can't necessarily predict what's going to happen.
Yep.
So there's a little bit of limitation there.
Yeah.
Speak to that.
Well, this goes into the data privacy kind of concept as well in my mind, because I'm starting to think about the digital tool more and more like we think about our financial investments. And as you were saying this, and I was thinking about it, start early. You don't know when you're going to need it, but you better start now. And I think that same analogy applies here, in that even if you're not comfortable sharing your data, you collecting it now is going to pay dividends later.
Right.
To your point, we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but the same scenario is in our investment portfolio. And so if we have everything that you've done in the past and we've captured that and can see the general trends, we are going to be better positioned to make the right decision moving forward with the information that we're bringing from our breeding pipeline, right? We know how these products are performing. We know your operation. And I think that over time, we're going to get even better at it, right? I think about some of the big gaps that we've had so far. Looking at a year snapshot in Fieldview is great, right? It tells you what happened. But when you step back and start looking at over time, what are you seeing? If you're seeing those incremental trends of performance increase over time, that's a combination of those farmers making the right decision and us bringing the right genetics to the farm. And so if we can add that into the conversation, then we can add into, hey, this field has seen this type of performance over time, we're going to start to be able to paint that picture of what are the best decisions to make there. The year effect is always going to be that unknown.
Right.
And so I've started to look at it more around, again, that financial portfolio. I don't want to go gangbusters. I want a nice, safe portfolio that's going to reduce my risk as much as possible and allow me to make the decisions for the entire operation, not chasing yield on one field.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a great analogy, and one of the things that I've found challenging over the years working with farmers is that the temptation is to maybe change too much based on what you just saw.
Yep.
You know, and that would kind of be like, you know, putting your whole portfolio into that hot stock that did great this year.
Yep.
You know, might not be the best long-term strategy, but it's always so hard not to respond to what you just saw.
Yeah.
And the year that just happened is always what's freshest in our mind.
Yes.
And in hindsight, it's so easy to look back and see, well, if I'd have done this, this, and this, and this, that would have been perfect for this year.
Yep.
But it may not be what you ought to do next year.
You know, what's really interesting is that basically what I feel like I'm testing is the opportunity for a digital recommendation, right? We know that we've been talking about digital recommendations and tailored solutions, and it's hard to kind of wrap your head around what that actually means because we're building it right now. But I'm seeing with some of our customers that initial response is that, right? We make a recommendation, they're skeptical but willing to test it with us. And that initial emotional response after that 1 year, you know, at the end of the season, they're just coming out of the combine, has oftentimes been frustration. Hey, why did you guys make this recommendation? But what we're seeing is that after a month, when we can allow them to digest the entire year and see their entire operation, they see the value in the recommendations that we're making. It's not that one field, it's not that one mistake, it's the entirety of it. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing guys that are consistently moving up their operation average, reducing those individual hits that they're seeing. And you have to have that conversation after the dust is settled. It can't be in the heat of the moment when they're harvesting because of that exact response. And so one of the things that we're struggling with is how do you present that information to them effectively? The tools aren't built that way currently, and so we need to kind of adjust the way that we're thinking about this, right? Because when Fieldview was built, it was that what is happening right now, and now we need to aggregate that. So
Yeah, and I think it's there's so many ways that you can get the wrong takeaway or misinterpret data, or look at things the wrong way, and there's a lot of different ways to analyze data, characterize data. It's not an easy thing to do, and and if we can create tools that either help farmers do that better on their own, or if it's incorporated into an algorithm that you develop, that maybe there's potential for benefit there.
Yeah, well, I think your comment really frames up to me one of the biggest challenges is that seed purchasing is still a very emotional purchase, right? And I think that we're doing ourselves a disservice by ignoring that and saying we're going to solve it with science. I think we need to meet people where they are today and say, we understand this is an emotional decision for you. There's a lot of things going on at one time for you to make that decision. So what information do you need to feel comfortable about it? And again, it goes right back to that relationship piece. If we don't use Fieldview as the foundation for a relationship to power the conversation, just like you would with a financial advisor, let's pull up all the charts and look at what's happening on your operation so that you and I can really discuss what needs to happen. And if you think about it one step further, a lot of the tools that we're proposing to build are going to be dealer focused. So how do we enable a customer to have a really good conversation with their dealer so that we can give them the information they need to have that? I think that's where we're going to see real success.
Right. When I'm talking with our dealers, that's a point I like to make, is that having that relationship with that grower, having the ability to use that data with him, it really strengthens the relationship that you have with your customer.
Correct.
And you shouldn't look at climate or the data as a threat.
Correct.
might replace you someday.
No.
It's something that makes you more valuable,
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah.
And I think people, there's a little bit of a disconnect. They see it as oh, you're trying to replace me with that data.
Yeah. No, it's the same, going right back to that, financial advisor kind of role. The first time you give your financial advisor all of the information about your finances, that's, you're laying bare your entire, financial scenario, and that's emotional. And I think this is the same thing. I mean, our customers are showing us the decisions that they're making, and we got to make sure that they feel comfortable about that because they see the value in it, right? It can't be a one-sided conversation, and I completely agree that there has been a disconnect between, are we trying to replace people with data? And I think that we need to shift away from that and say, no, we're empowering people to have really strong conversations with that foundation of a good relationship.
Yeah. No, that's great. I think we'll kind of let it end there. I can't imagine ending on a stronger statement than that. So, Scott, thanks a lot for sitting down with us. Appreciate you. You actually made the effort to come to the hotel here, since you're not necessarily here for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
But I certainly appreciate it, and thanks everybody for joining us here today with this Ask the Agronomist special edition. And thanks again, Scott, for joining us.
Thank you, Lance. Appreciate it.
Talk a little bit about the diversity of agriculture in your part of Ohio.
Yeah, it is quite diverse. Well, there's still several dairies, so we've got silage acres that we support. There's not a lot of silage in Ohio. I think it's around 200,000 acres total. There's probably about 4 to 5 million acres of beans and about 3 to 4 million acres of corn. So,
Okay.
And where I cover from Lake Erie down to about central Ohio, there's quite a diversity in relative maturity of products, like you said, because in far north Ohio, they'll plant 95 to 105 RM is their range. And when you get into north central Ohio, it'll be 103 to 113. And then I even sell some 116-day corn, or make recommendations with it, because a lot of guys now are trying to some fuller season corn, pushing it north, which is what our competitor is doing as well. So there's opportunity there. They don't mind drying corn if they can get the yield.